Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the final grain market blast of the week. It is Friday, the 29th of August, all day. We've made it. It looks like we've made it. Before Angie kicks off with a rapid roundup of the latest pricing flows and market moving news in agricultural markets, I will get rid of the legals. Throw them out the window. Nothing discussed on this spaces session constitutes trading or investment advice or infers any kind of endorsement by PIQ, myself, Ryan Paisley, or indeed the glamorous with a capital G, Angie Setzer. Woo!
Woohoo! No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I just was all choked up. I was so excited about being here. And now I ruined the whole entire thing.
I do have to apologise. It's my fault that it's slightly earlier than scheduled, so there's going to be a lot of people tuning in. Well, some probably some still tuning in at 1:15 and going, oh yeah, it's now at 1:45. And then the ones that go to 1:45 go, hang on, they finished recording this half an hour ago.
Well,
so I apologise.
To be fair, the best way to build an audience is to keep them guessing.
Keep them guessing.
That's the way it works. So happy Friday. I basically recycled the bullet points from yesterday. So if you were bummed you missed yesterday's conversation, congratulations. It's basically the same today. So it saved us a little bit of, redundancy, if you will. Market wise here as we start the day, obviously we've got corn up, a couple cents right now. Had a really strong close into the end, kind of was just like someone call an ambulance, but not for me, yesterday, like really down at the beginning, tested support and then kind of found some buying, finished up pretty decently. We're kind of carrying that forward here in the overnight. Wheat's mixed, beans are down. And all that we're paying attention to, is really what the heck happens between China and the US, here today, basically.
Yeah.
I have yet to see any sort of headline or anything about any sort of conversation taking place. So that's a little bit of a bummer. I think is today the big day or have they not released any sort of detail? Am I missing details?
Well, this is it because I thought it was, but I've seen nothing so far. So
right?
Maybe we are missing.
I'm like, I thought I was. I mean, I've been sitting here scrolling, but so we'll see. There was a trade representative announcement about some continued extensions. I don't think that really mattered much and a few other things like that. And I mean, I think there's just so many, confusing moving pieces. We've talked about this a million different times of like, okay, obviously China has different levels of tariffs. We have, the fentanyl tariffs. We have the, moves that they've made to try to get those pulled back. The rumor is as long as the U.S. kind of does something with the fentanyl tariffs, they'll probably look to buy the Boeing jets and the soybeans. Yeah. Basically. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We'll see. Hopefully they're able to get something put together because we did get another week of export sales yesterday with a 0 in the column, beside China. And so we are seeing a continued conversation about, oh my God, what if they don't come in? We're seeing cash markets start to back up ahead of harvest, which everyone I think kind of needs to pump the brakes here. But at the same time, I guess if you don't want to take in soybeans, you can post $1.60 under bid. It's America. We're, capable of doing whatever you want in that regard. But, there are a lot of folks that are panicking, ahead of harvest this year simply because, okay, if we don't move these beans out, what is this going to look like? Yada, yada, yada. And yeah, we're going to have to make some alternate plans, but we also have to recognize in soybeans in general, we really don't want to rely on China going forward. One of the conversations we had yesterday, during our peer group was kind of like, remember, when looking at China and everyone wanting to just kind of hang our hats on China trade, there was a conversation about, China is now going to turn to Australia and they love Australia and China and Australia, yada, 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 because China and Canada, 3 years ago it was China and Australia that were getting into the fight and China and Canada were buddying up. You know what I mean? So let's remember here, that, when it comes down to it, we don't want to, the last thing we want is for China actually to come in and buy 30 or 35 million metric tons of soybeans from the U.S. because they've been convinced it's the right thing to do. We just don't have that, and the ability to supply the rest of the world. So that's what we're watching. We'll watch those negotiations. Obviously, we want them to come in and buy, but we want tread carefully, because we have had a very poor finish to this crop, especially in the Eastern Corn Belt and some of these other places. I was just watching Eric Snodgrass's, weather video. He's the nutrient, meteorologist there. And he spent the first 5-10 minutes kind of outlining where it's been as dry as what it has, how dry it's been throughout the month of August, and really the problems that are going going to come from it, especially in the soybean side of things. I've kind of said this before. Everyone loves to talk about pod counts in soybeans and the potential they have for yield, which is true. The pod counts are kind of set June, July timeframe. They're based on a lot to do with obviously weather, planting conditions, all of these other things. And then in August, you have, grain fill. And so when you have a really dry grain fill, you tend to take your yield potential and toss it out the window.
Yeah.
My biggest worry right now is that we're, looking at the potential of losing 3 bushel to the acre on soybean yields. It'll take us back down to where we were a year ago. Nothing, catastrophic by any means. 50.7, 51 bushel to the acre nationally is pretty consistent with where we lie. But if we move 3 bushel to the acre out of this thing, you just took 240 bushel off the ending stocks. Now, we can argue until the cows come home over how you adjust demand, but the majority of the crush demand that's cited in the supply and demand outlook from the USDA isn't going to be adjusted lower with the, how we have RVOs, the things that we've come up with on the biofuels. So, soybeans could be a sleeper. I would definitely be careful with them, simply because we have a lot of expectations. There's a lot of counting chickens before they hatch in the bean market on production, which is easy to do. If the plant looks green, if it looks lush, all of these things, like you just assume it's going to be a big crop. So we'll see how that plays out. We're hearing the same sort of thing on the corn side. Lots of, kind of harvest getting started earlier. I have customers that are getting ready to chop silage in the south part of the state. That's about 2 weeks earlier than what you would normally see. And doesn't tend to be, when you start harvesting a crop earlier, you never really harvest a massive crop early. Like a crop's like barbecue, right? It's low and slow. It's good. You want to drag it out to the finish. You don't want to just burn it and we got her heated up to 160 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's just not what you want to do. And so it'll be interesting to see how the market reacts once harvest gets going. And the positive news is that based on the weather forecast, based on how quickly this crop is coming to maturity, it'll be only another couple of weeks before we'll probably be neck deep into a lot of the harvest there in the southern parts of the Corn Belt and getting a better feel for what we're seeing and what we've got. Lastly, obviously we have grain flow things. And so that goes back to some of what I talked about earlier, with the harvest basis going real wide on soybeans. A lot of merchandisers trying to figure out what the heck they're going to do. A lot of the talk is right now in the Western Corn Belt that the PNW is pretty well booked up with corn movement. And so even if we did sell a bunch of beans out of the PNW, it would be a bit of a logistical bottleneck, to those. And so there's a lot of uncertainty over how that'll all play out. But it is helping to kind of keep U.S. prices competitive, even with limited ability to ship in the short term out of the PNW and some of these other things. You're still seeing the U.S. get good buying interest. Yesterday's export sales, we sold another 2 million metric ton of corn. We continue to double last year's sales pace. And just seeing this really, a lot of folks want to say front loading of corn. No, they're just sourcing their needs from the U.S. right now. Like they're not going over and above, what they need because they're worried about what happens later. Like it's just, they have needs. They have, short-term needs.
We all have needs.
We all have needs.
We all have needs.
Right? And the U.S. is here to supply
I'm
them.
only a man. A simple man.
That's right. Everyone's like, I need my corn. And we're like, we got you, fam. We got corn. And so I think that's the thing to kind of watch is, we have a significant risk of production being lowered. And for the last several weeks, all we've heard about is, okay, well, if production gets lowered, demand gets lowered right along with it. And at this point in time, you're really not going to see exports slow unless Brazil starts puking supplies into the pipeline, which right now you're not seeing it. Every bushel that's offered by the farmer is basically scooped up as soon as it's offered by the domestic market. And so you're going to have to see prices move much, much higher to curb this export demand.
Right.
Because historically speaking, once you get to prices this cheap, you want to buy. And currently the U.S. is the only one offering it. And so the same can be said, for the rest of the world with soybeans and some of these other things. Like we just really have to be careful with this idea that demand is plateaued. For some reason, that's been something that's kind of been living in the head of a lot of market analysts and even farmers. Like I'll get farmers who'll be like, well, no one wants our stuff. And I'm like, well, I can show you non-China exports and say that that's not it, but it is one of those things where, demand around the world continues to grow. Demand in the U.S. continues to grow. Ethanol margins are phenomenal. like you're on the cusp of where it's almost making sense here. If we see a continuation of ethanol exports, stay steady, and we were to see, a sort of an adoption of year-round E15 and a potential move towards, more inclusion of ethanol into the domestic fuel supply, which I don't think you'll see that, though you will see that year-round E15 open up. You see these types of things, and really it's hard to argue that ethanol demand needs to come down either. So lots of things to be moving, though it's going to be boring AF until we know what the heck the China number,
Well, this is it though, right?
we're stuck.
Everyone's like, everyone's in this holding pattern. And, for equity traders, we've seen it ahead of the Nvidia results that were on Wednesday. Yeah, there's a lot of big things happening, and a lot of people are like, a lot of people are trying to keep their powder dry, stay safe. It's the end of the summer. Well, it feels like the end of the summer already.
Right?
It's what you don't want to do is trade really well, trade really disciplined, or hold your nerve, and then blow it all 2 days before a big announcement, or 2 days before we should get some big result from somewhere.
Yes.
Trust me, I've done it.
And that's what it feels like. I mean, we feel like we're on the cusp. I think right now the market is pricing in zero China demand. The risk is that China comes in and actually buys more. I had this conversation with someone the other day where I was like, all of this gnashing of teeth over needing China business. Really we just need them to buy about 15, 16, 20 million metric ton based on the current projection, which is in line. 15 million metric ton would be about 7-8 million metric tons lower than what they bought a year ago. You know what I mean? So like it's one of those things where we just really have to be careful, that we don't push too hard, because I do feel like you're going to see, crop size begin to shrink. And really when it comes down to it right now, like I said, we don't want to ruin this domestic demand that we've built, by having high prices, margins, just blah, 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 blah. So, but yeah, it's Friday. We'll see what the China conversation looks like. Next week will probably be a week where we see more in the way of harvest progress begin, more of the actual harvest, numbers, start to come out, and that should give us a bit more in the way of direction here as we work our way ahead. But it's a long weekend now, so even scarier if we get a good China headline at the end of the close where we have 3 days to
then you got
think about it.
3 days to sweat.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't know. Happy Friday. Happy Labor Day weekend. It doesn't feel right, to me at all that it's there, but here we sit.
Especially, I'll tell you, obviously I can't really take the mickey too much, because obviously we had a holiday this week, I think it was, or last week, whatever day it was. But no. But Angie, thank you so much as always. You know how much love I have for you, and how much love I have for you helping me with these shows. I'm sure our listeners feel the same. You're an absolute rock star. You're the nicest person in ags markets. Listeners, whatever you're doing today, again, I apologise for the early show, especially I can see everyone turning up late going, what the hell is, where's this thing running?
Like we said, the best way to build an audience, keep them guessing.
Keep them guessing. Whatever you're doing, if you're out in the fields, please stay safe. If you're in front of screens, keep it tight. Look after yourself, look after your families. Much love, and we'll see you all on Tuesday. Have a good one.
Have a good one, guys.